So hi, my name is Hayley Watts. I am the author of How to Fix Meetings. I got really interested in meetings and meetings culture, having been to some brilliant meetings and some really bad meetings, all within the same organisation. And that got me interested in thinking about how we deliver meetings better. It says there, up your game, be the chair that wows the rest. I think chairing meetings and taking part in meetings as a manager is a really good opportunity to be able to inspire your people, to be able to get engagement. It's also an opportunity to do exactly the opposite, for people to feel a bit demotivated if they're not feeling like that they should be there, for example. I have a client recently who approached me and said, look, my manager insists that I go to these meetings, but I don't get anything from it. I don't feel connected to the people. It's a tricky thing. So meetings are a bit of a sore point for a number of people. And I know that some of you will have amazing experiences of going to meetings and collaborating with others. And some of you will have some experiences that are less good. And I'm sure actually you'll all have both of those things. So I am one of the team at Think Productive. We're reimagining work. We're helping organisations with culture change to create environments where people can do their best work. We're helping leaders and managers with their leadership and management skills. And we're helping everybody in organisations to get their best work done through being more productive. And meetings is, I think, a really important part of that. So how we're going to work today, the chat is open. My colleague Francis is going to be keeping an eye on the chat, pulling out any kind of relevant points. The session is being recorded, but the chat won't appear on the YouTube channel. Please do use the Q&A function. I can't stress that enough. That's a really good way for us to be able to interact and make sure that we get your questions answered. Chat tends to get noisy sometimes, and that can be distracting for people. So please don't feel we've got to keep an eye on the chat. Francis will pull out anything there that's key. I can see that Joe's just put a hand up. Joe, did you have a question? Let me just give me a moment and we will unmute you. Joe, hi. Oh, I think I've unmuted the wrong Joe. That's not the best start. Let's just give me a moment to do that. Sorry. Joanne, did you have a question? No, not hearing anything there. Okay, no worries. So yeah, Q&A. Feel free to use the reactions. Do please contribute and share your thoughts and your ideas in the chat as well. So our session today is just a bit of a taster for some of our meetings and workshops. You're going to gain some insights and tools to make your meetings a bit more memorable, interesting and productive. That's what we're aiming for. And explore how you can improve engagement in your teams via great meetings. And I'm going to encourage you to spend a few moments at the end sharing your plan. What are you going to use from today? And if there's anything you'd like to add, please do that through the Q&A and asking questions. Very keen to get your questions today. People have said hello in the chat and for today's session, like that's great, that works. What we often do in our in-person and our online longer workshops is we will do a bit more of a check-in. We ask people to share not just their name, but something that's going well for them. The reason why I ask people to do that is when people share something that's going well, and often just say like one sentence is fine, they smile. It means that at the beginning of the meeting, they've said something already. They've contributed in a way that is positive. Very often meetings in the world of work are solving problems, coming up with solutions, maybe even disagreeing with each other. And if you've said something already in the meeting and it's been positive, it's so much easier to come in later on and share your thoughts and your ideas with your colleagues. So I want to encourage you for all of your meetings to include an opening round, a checking in. It can be very short. If you've got a large meeting with lots of people, I mean, we want to avoid those generally, but if you have got quite a few people, there are different ways of doing that. You might put some images on the screen and ask them what their favourite is or how they feel about something, and choose something a bit controversial. I tried pineapple on pizza once and that was too controversial. I won't be doing that again. You might ask people to score something out of 10. Lots of light-hearted ways of just getting people to contribute in whatever way you would like them to do. So thank you to those of you who have already contributed in the chat there to tell us where you are. And I can see that somebody's in the New Forest, which is literally one of my favourite parts of the world. A quote here from my colleague Graeme, who's the founder at Think Productive, really emphasising that the best meetings are ones where it's better to have 5 brains around the table than just sitting on your own and doing something and figuring something out. That's where meetings are truly valuable. We want to have more of those kind of meetings, and we want to set the meetings that you're running. We want to set those ones up so that this is what you get, this is the result. In our meetings workshop, we very often talk about what to do before, during, and after a meeting. We've only got a very short amount of time today, so I'm happy to answer questions about before, during, and after. But in terms of the slides and the tips that I wanted to show you, I thought we'd focus on the during part. One of the things that Graeme and I talk about in the book is this idea of the yin and yang of meetings. The yin meetings are the one where there's lots of deep listening, people are open to learning and to new ideas, there's lots of reflection taking place. And in all honesty, the focus is probably on what's happened already and where we're at now. The yang meetings are highly structured. There's definitely going to be an agenda for those. It's probably going to have timings and lots of detail. The focus, the emphasis is on deep work, and it says there deliberate ignorance. What we mean by that is deliberately choosing to ignore other things so that we can take part and engage in the meeting. So for example, my phone is on do not disturb mode at the moment. I haven't got the chat on because I know that that will be distracting for me, but I know that Francis is keeping an eye on that, and that allows me to do that. For our yang meetings, we're focusing on planning and taking action on what the future is going to be like. Both of those things are good in meetings. We want both of those, but we want them to be in balance, because if you've only got one but not the other, things tend to get a bit out of kilter. So if there's some meetings that you're going to that you feel maybe they're a bit broken, have a think about, are they more yin, are they more yang? What do you do to bring the seed of the other into that meeting? So for example, I used to be a school governor. As a school governor, the first meeting I went to was 26 agenda items in a 2-hour meeting. We just went through each thing. It felt like a tick box exercise. There was definitely no listening and deep reflecting and learning going on. It was like, we need to approve this. Are we going to do this? Yes or no? Yes, it was pacey, but people didn't really get into the problem. There was not much strategic work happening there, which is what the meeting was supposed to be about. So we changed that. We brought in some more of the yin. We reduced the number of things on the agenda. We dealt with more of it outside of the meeting. And then we had a number, 1 or 2 more substantive agenda items that we could do the yin. We could do some deep listening. We could learn more about it. We had much more discussion and debate. And then we moved into the future focus and the yang towards the end of that agenda item. So that's just an example to give you around what we mean about that yin and yang of meetings. If you're chairing the meeting, it's important to know what your preference is, if you like. For me, yin, sensitivity, deep listening, openness, reflection and learning. I'm a coach. Those things come very naturally to me. So I know that staying on time is something that I find a challenge. And to help with that, I've got a clock just above my monitor there, so I can see the time without having to kind of look at my watch. I can just glance up at the clock and know if we're on track or not, and that's really helpful to me. So just thinking about how you use that. One of the things I really, really want to do is encourage you to be more ruthless with your meetings. Very often when I'm delivering training about meetings and meetings culture, and I will say to people, what happens when you receive an invitation for a meeting? In fact, I'm going to ask you that now. Head to the chat and tell me, if you receive an invite for a meeting, what's the first thing you do? Accept it. Yeah. See if I'm available. Usually accept. Look at the calendar. Yeah. Review the calendar before accepting. See if I'm available. Yeah. So there's this inclination to want to accept. And we don't always need to do that. Sometimes when you're looking at your calendar and you're saying, well, I'm available, that doesn't mean that this meeting is a priority over all the other things that you have going on in your world of work, all the things that you're working on that make a really good impact. And I can see Jonathan has put there in the chat, am I really needed? That's a great question to be asking yourself at this point. See if it's relevant to me at all, says Nina. Yes, absolutely. So that instead of just blindly accepting, instead of just going to the calendar and saying, oh, if I'm available, I'll go, I want you to ask yourself, am I important to this meeting? Can I delegate it to someone else? Can I attend part of the meeting? We call that making a guest appearance. If you're inviting people to meetings and they're asking you these questions, like, am I important to the meeting? Yes, great, they're engaged. They're looking to make best use of their energy and their attention. Let's give people enough information when we invite them to the meeting for them to be able to decide these things. Let's try and put the emphasis on the person who is chairing the meeting or requesting the meeting even, to be able to say, hi, I need you and this is why. So they might say, Francis, I need you at the meeting because you've got lots of experience of working with this client. It would really help move this piece of work forward. You might say, Martha, you're welcome to come to the meeting because I know you expressed some interest, but your attendance is entirely optional. And that lets people know if you really need them or if they're a bit of the icing on the cake and they can decide depending on their current workload. If there's no agenda and we're being really ruthless, maybe we're not going to attend. And that can sound quite harsh, particularly for people who are more junior in an organisation. They may find that difficult. So I want to encourage you, if somebody invites you to a meeting and you're thinking, I'm not sure that this is the best use of my energy, ask questions. Can I see the agenda? What do you need from me? What should I do to plan and prepare? And sometimes people may end up saying, actually, maybe you can sit this one out. If we're getting really ninja level on this, we're going to say, if there's no purpose statement, a purpose statement is something you prepare in advance of the meeting. That's just a sentence or a few bullet points, just like we had at the beginning of the session today, to say this is what we're going to achieve in our time together. So I really want to encourage you to share these things with people so you know what you're asking them to get into before the meeting. Sometimes those regular meetings, the daily or the weekly or the monthly or the quarterly team meetings, they may get a bit stale. And I'm just using team meetings as an example. If something's feeling stale, I want to encourage you to delete it, perhaps temporarily, but maybe miss 2 or 3 and go back to people and say, what have you missed? What are you gaining an appetite for? What could we replace this with? Our head office team at Think Productive don't have any meetings in August. They get rid of all the meetings, and then in September they get back together and reset and decide what they would like to have, what they've missed. So replace them with nothing and then allow people to develop a hunger for something new. What's the problem with meetings? Why are so many of you here? Why are meetings a struggle for people? And when I ask people in workshops this, the thing that comes up most often is there's too many of them. So many people are saying to me, I've got meetings all day, every day. I'm doing my work in the evenings and at the weekends, and that's just not sustainable. We've also got a lot of people saying, well, I don't know why I'm here. I've been asked to come, but I'm not really sure what I'm contributing. One of the clients that I've been working with recently, they had somebody who'd said, I don't understand why I'm asked to go to this meeting every week, but my boss said I have to go. So I've been going and I've never contributed and I've never said anything. So I encourage them to go back to their boss and ask that question. What do you need me to be at this meeting for? And their manager said, well, I didn't realise you were still going every week. That was something I wanted you to do for a few weeks in your induction, so you got to know people. But you don't need to be going every week. This person had been in their role for 2 years, but they'd never had this conversation. They'd never questioned the status quo. I touched on that already. When is the work going to happen? That sense that we're in meetings all day, every day. And then you've got is anyone even paying attention? Particularly, a lot of people's meetings will be online now. For most of the clients that I'm working with, I'm probably seeing kind of 60–70% of meetings are online and a few of the others are in person. Sometimes they're hybrid, which I think is even more difficult. We'll talk about that shortly. So there are some challenges and problems with meetings, but when they work well, they are a great opportunity to bring a team together, to help to get people engaged and help them feel really motivated and inspired to do a really good job. And that's the type of meeting we want to move towards. Meetings can be expensive too. We've done some back of the envelope type maths here. As a manager, you will probably convene meetings that involve a number of people. And if somebody was to come to you and say, well, the number of hours that person spent in the meeting, the planning, the preparation, and the actions they took afterwards, if you were to receive an invoice for that meeting, outlining that before, during, and after time, including your time in preparing for the meeting, would that be good value for the outcomes that you're getting? And really want to ask yourself, like, am I getting good value for these meetings? And if you're not, you need to change them. Either change the people who are there, reduce the number of people who are there, or change the format so that you are getting something more from them that is giving you really good value on that. And we've got here because people wear it as a bit of a badge of honour, I think, sometimes. Like, oh, how are you? Oh, really busy, I've got loads of meetings. Nobody's given us a map and said, this is how we do meetings in our organisation. Some of the organisations I go into already have kind of a manifesto of this is how we do meetings here. That's one of the things that we can help organisations to put together so that when somebody new joins the team or the organisation, they have an understanding around how meetings are done, and that practice is more commonly applied. I'm going to encourage you to do it now. Like, I can't see you, but I want you to just, if you're sat down, I want you to just stand up, have a bit of a move, a stretch, a jump about. We spend so much time now in the world of work just staring at our screens. I want to encourage you to moving around during meetings can help change the energy. I was running some communication skills training yesterday, and we had a massive room and quite a small group, and we got people moving around the room and using different parts of the building in different ways, and that just helped keep our energy levels up. A change of scene can be really valuable. But for your online meetings, you might just encourage people to say, like, everybody stand up now, just between agenda items, and do a bit of a move, stretch, jump about break. So you can sit back down if you want to, if you haven't already, but if you want to stay standing, that's cool too. It's good for us. This can be a bit of a sensitive topic, I think. The HIPPO effect. The HIPPO is the highest paid person's opinion. The data might tell us one thing, but the research suggests if the data tells us one thing, but the highest paid person in the meeting says something else, people are more likely to agree with the highest paid person, despite the data and the evidence in front of them. So there are a few ways that you might deal with that. One way is to get people to write things down first, potentially anonymously. If you're doing it in person, you could use a trusty post-it note or a sticky wall. If you're doing it online, you might use a whiteboard or a Miro board or something like that, where people can write down their thoughts and their ideas, but they're anonymous and we can't see whose is whose. We need to be forgiving about spelling mistakes and typos and grammatical errors, because people might just be doing that off the cuff. But that is a really good way to minimise the effect of the HIPPO. If you are the HIPPO in the group, then offer to go last. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, what do you think? I'm still making up my mind on this. I'd like to hear other people's views and opinions. If you're chairing the meeting, the chances are you probably know who the HIPPO is. Ask them to go last. There might even be some conversations with the HIPPO to let them know that that's what you're doing. I don't know if you've come across this idea of decision fatigue. Decision fatigue came up from some research where some researchers were in a courtroom, people who had been convicted of a crime, they were serving a prison sentence, and they were applying to be released early. And along the bottom of that graph there, we have the time of the day. The wibbly line shows us the likelihood of whether somebody is going to be released or not. Obviously, it's a complicated issue, right? The line's wibbly, but there's a definite downward trend. And then the dotted lines represent when people take a break. And the researchers concluded that this was because when people are feeling well rested and they've taken a break, they are more willing to change the status quo. So if you're in a meeting and somebody's asking you to make a decision and you're feeling like, oh, I'm a bit tired, I'm just going to say no. You may not consciously do that, but if you know you're feeling tired and you're not taking a break for a while, you might suggest, let's take a break to mull this over. It could just be 5 or 10 minutes. It makes a difference. If you're scheduling meetings and big decisions are being made, you might want to think about scheduling those earlier in the day. Gives people a bit more of their decision-making capacity that they can use during those conversations. And our decision fatigue comes into play when we're looking at our calendars, because we're also busy going to meetings. We don't tend to stop to think about, is this something I really need to do? Is this something I can really bring value to? So that comes back to the ruthlessness that we talked about earlier. There's no space in this person's calendar for them to actually do their work. They're going, I mean, it's nice that they've got a yoga class in there, but there's lots of things going on there in their calendar. We want to allow some time to deal with the unexpected. We want to allow some time in our day to deal with our priorities. And there are some priorities popped into the calendar there, but that's a whole different conversation. Virtual meetings. Some people love them, some people hate them. A lot of organisations that I work with are insistent on doing hybrid meetings. I think if you've got the majority of people in a room and you've got 1 or 2 people joining online, it can sometimes work. It depends on the technology you have in that room and whether the people who are joining online can be heard and can hear everybody else. Some of the organisations I work with have got like microphones up in the ceiling, which is helpful. Otherwise, you might want to literally have a microphone that you pass around. And what that does is it means that the people who are joining online, they can hear what's being said, but also it means that people are really clear who's talking and who's next. So the person who's got the microphone is the person contributing and speaking. It becomes very hard to hear and understand what's taking place when there's more than one conversation going on in a room, when that's a hybrid meeting. The other thing you can do with any hybrid meetings is to have somebody in the room whose responsibility it is to keep an eye on the online delegates, to make sure that they are able to hear, they are able to see what's happening, and that if they are raising their hands or if they're sharing something in the chat, that they can draw that to the attention of the person chairing the conversation. The ideal, I think, is that everybody's joining in and participating in the same way. So on today's session, we're all joining online. When I'm saying head to the chat, everybody's able to do that. If you're doing that in person and some people are sat in a room, only one person can often access the chat. So you're not getting everybody's thoughts and ideas and opinions there. I've got a couple more slides, then we're going to be coming to questions. So if you have got any questions, feel free to jot them down or head to the Q&A and share those. There is a question that I'm asked quite a lot. It's like, when should it be a meeting and when should it be something else? So I think often if you're sharing information, that shouldn't be a meeting. It may be that you need to discuss the information you shared and have a conversation about that and provide an opportunity for people to ask questions. You can do that in the meeting, but if you can share the information beforehand, people are going to come with much better quality of questions. They're going to have an opportunity to process and think about that beforehand, which is for most people is going to be helpful. So that could be a slide deck or a one-pager, maybe an infographic, maybe some bullet points in an email. Maybe you use a Slack or a Teams channel to communicate some of the information before meeting, or Google and OneNote project management tools. My personal favourite is a video or an audio recording. I know some of you may have met at the CIPD Festival of Work event last week, and I've sent a handful of people some little video recordings to follow that up rather than just lots of text on an email. So just thinking about different ways that we can present information to people. When people talk about constraints in relation to meetings, they tend to think about the amount of time that a meeting takes. I want you to think not just about the amount of time, but the number of people that you're inviting to the meeting. Can we reduce that a bit further? So if we've only got the people who are really essential, there might be a bit of FOMO. People might feel that they're missing out. But you can explain, I'm trying to give you back time. That way you're able to focus on some of the other priorities. Sometimes in longer versions of this session, I might ask people to share in one word how they feel about meetings. It's very hard to sit on the fence with one word. You might ask people to just we're making a decision about this. Let's just take people's temperatures. Let's just say, do we want to say yes? Do we want to say no? Just to see where people are at different points in the conversation can be useful. So you can play with constraints and do that in a few different ways. I bet some of you are tempted right now to be doing some multitasking and doing something else. Less than 2% of the population can multitask, but 92% of us are multitasking during meetings. I want to encourage you to move away from that. There is research that suggests if you're doodling or colouring in, drawing during a meeting, then you're able to take on more information. But if you're just dealing with other emails, doing other work, that's much less effective and it makes the meeting drag on. If you're feeling it's one of those meetings where you're going to be multitasking and doing something else, then maybe just don't go. And 25% of people saying they do this often or all the time. And actually, I wouldn't be surprised if those numbers have gone up as our online and hybrid meetings have increased. We want meetings that are going to be really highly action orientated. How do we do that? We want to refer to the purpose statement at the beginning of the conversation. And we want to make sure that the actions we're committing to during our meetings are taking us forward with that purpose. Wrapping up each agenda item to clarify the action points is helpful. And I think it's a good idea to ask people to share their own action points so that everybody has the same understanding of who is doing what. Who's going to do it, what, and when? I don't want meetings to be starting with, let's look back at the minutes from last time and see who's done what. That should be done outside of the meetings, that one person can update and say, do you know what? Everybody's done everything that they agreed to do at the last meeting, except Hayley. She was off sick last week, but she's going to get everything done for us by Friday. It creates a bit more of a bit more momentum to the start of the conversation. Having some clarity about how those action items are going to be reviewed and tracked over time can be really helpful. There might be a central place to do that, such as a OneNote document or a task management tool. We also want to apply the 2-minute rule. The 2-minute rule is anything that's going to take 2 minutes or less. We're going to do that straight away. So as soon as your meeting finishes, build 10 minutes into the meeting or 10 minutes into your calendar after to get anything that's going to be quick and easy done. So any 2-minute actions get done straight away. The kind of things that you're going to be writing on your to-do list, we don't want one-word things, we want sentences. We want to be clear on what the next physical action is. What is it that I'm actually going to do? So in this example, it's email John with the information about Friday's review meeting. If John had taken on responsibility for delivering an outcome, so say, for example, we've asked John to liaise with HR to get a new team administrator in place for us. John might not note the next physical action. It might get noted that John is going to lead on that. But what John needs to put on his to-do list is contact Martin in HR, for example. Encouraging you at the end of meetings that you're running to put aside a little bit of time to review success. Did the meeting achieve its purpose? Maybe you had a different reason for attending the meeting. Was that met, particularly if you're looking to develop relationships, network and meet new people? If there are any people who didn't contribute, maybe there's an opportunity there to catch up with them. Did they understand what was going on? Were they able to contribute if they wanted to? Maybe they don't feel that they need to be there. Is there anything to park? Anything we talked about and we touched on, but we want to come back to at a later date or outside of the meeting? At Think Productive, at the end of each meeting, we will often share what was our highlight and an even better if. And that helps us to improve and adapt meetings for the future. So I'm going to invite you to just very quickly jot down any actions that you would like to take as a result of those ideas that I've shared. I can see a couple of ideas, a couple of questions in the Q&A, so we will head there. I'll just stop sharing for a moment and we're going to go to the Q&A section. We've got a couple of questions come in already, but please do head to the Q&A and share any questions that you might have. The first question, which is a brilliant one, with hybrid meetings, even when the tech is working well, it can be tricky for people online to feel part of it and involved. Any tips for this? I mean, where possible, I would encourage you to all either be in the room or to all be online. And it will depend on the numbers. Francis, for example, isn't based in the UK. And sometimes when we get together as a team, Francis may dial in to that conversation. Sometimes that's not the best use of Francis's time, so he doesn't do that. So I think where it's possible to either have everybody in the room or have everybody online, do that. I've already shared the idea around having somebody in the room to be responsible for liaising with the people and making sure that the chair is aware if somebody who's joining online would like to contribute. And I think just being really clear with the people who are in the room that, you know, we have got somebody else joining us online, and it's really helpful for them if just one person at a time is talking. And that reviewing success at the end is important as well. I think maybe going to people who are joining hybridly first to ask, you know, how was it for you? What could we do to make it better for next time, particularly if that's a regular, reoccurring meeting. So do please head to the Q&A section if you've got any questions. I've got another question there. Partial attention in online meetings can be a real issue. It's difficult to manage this. Yeah, you're right. It absolutely is. And you can tell, can't you, when somebody's sat there reading their emails and doing something else. I think if it's you doing that, that's easier to control because you can say, I'm not going to go to the meeting because that's like, you know, I've got something else that I need to focus on. Keeping the meeting short, having that stand up, stretch, move, jump about break, getting people to look, encouraging them to look out the window. Sometimes I will say to people during live sessions, right, I want everybody to look out the window, unmute yourselves, and then shout out what it is that you can see. You can use things like polls. You can ask people to head to the chat and share their thoughts and ideas. You could do a round robin where you say, I'm going to ask everybody what their thoughts are, but perhaps if you haven't got anything to say, you could just pass and you let them know in advance if or, you know, what order you're going to go to people in. So I think that is a challenge, encouraging people. If you're feeling that they're doing something else and they're multitasking and they're not paying attention, have a conversation with them about that outside of the meeting and just say, you know, what's it like being on the other end of the screen? Is there something we can do to make it more engaging? We've got another question there. When you're sending video messages instead of walls of text, do you use your phone and is this well received? I love the idea. Sometimes I use my phone. Sometimes I use a tool called Loom, which I use on my computer. The Loom videos are free if it's 5 minutes or less. So that's a good incentive to keep it short. I guess it's some people like it, some people don't like it so much. My advice would be give it a try, ask people, see what happens. Lovely question here. Should you have someone taking minutes if you're chairing, or should you focus on doing both? Definitely don't focus on doing both. We expect way too much of the person chairing the meeting. I would encourage you to have, I mean, AI can take notes, so let's do that where possible. Encourage people to take their own actions, so they're not responsible. They can't say, well, I haven't done it because nobody sent the minutes of the meeting out. We don't need detailed minutes of exactly who said what. We need actions and key decisions that are made. So I would have one person chairing the meeting. Maybe somebody else is either taking note of the actions, or ideally AI is doing that and somebody's role is to review it afterwards before it's sent out and shared with everyone. And then have somebody different who's a timekeeper to help keep each agenda item on track. And we're going to allocate on the agenda how much time we're giving to each item. So they're just some of the roles that you might have in a meeting, so that the chair isn't expected to be the person that makes the meeting work. If we're all attending a meeting and we're all agreed on the meeting purpose, then we are all contributing to achieving that purpose and making the conversation a success, rather than expecting the chair to do everything. Great question here. When chairing meetings with trustees, who are there on a voluntary basis, after all, is there anything you can offer as best practice when chairing usually Zoom meetings? Loads and loads of ideas on that. Covered quite a few of them here. We want to make it fun, we want to make it engaging. I think when you're working with trustees and volunteers, it's important to understand their motivation. What are they looking to get out of it? And are they doing that? Very happy to follow that up with you. My previous life, I worked in the charity sector, so I've got quite a lot of experience of that, but may not be relevant to everyone. But it's a great question. Feel free to follow up with me afterwards. Jonathan has said, do we need minutes or action points sufficient? Definitely action points are sufficient. Who's going to want to read or type up minutes? Optimum length of time for a meeting. Really good question. I want to encourage you not to have meetings that start on the hour. We're going to be finished in the next 7 or 8 minutes. We're finishing at 1:45. So you've got time if you've got a meeting at 3 or whatever the time is in the time zone you're in. You've got a bit of time between meetings. So I think 25 minutes is a good amount of time. I used to work with an organisation where people had to really justify if they wanted more than 25 minutes of your time, and I think that's a good precedence to set. A lot of the time, it's an hour, and that's just the default setting in Outlook. You can change that centrally, by the way. The IT team can change that, so that might be a conversation worth having as well. I can see there's a couple more questions, and we should have time for those. I'm working on setting up a staff network for managers, which will consist of both online and in-person meetings. Any tips on how to set these up to encourage attendance? I'm really interested in the idea of getting into deep conversations. They feel heard and able to air their views. Love that. Absolutely brilliant. And I think those kind of meetings are the spaces where 5 brains truly are greater than one. I think either have an online option or an in-person option. Maybe people can choose which they'd rather join rather than trying to make those hybrid. I think that's what you're saying you're doing in that. I'm not 100% sure. In terms of encouraging attendance, let people know what the purpose is, and if they're brought into that, and word it in a way that outlines what's the benefit for them. So you're trying to sell the idea to them, I guess. And also that's carving out time for their own personal development, maybe. So you could emphasize the importance of that perhaps, but maybe also going to them and asking them what they would want to get from it. That can be a good way to increase the likelihood of them attending, because you're co-creating that and working together. One of my regular meetings is with a team of specialists, many of which are neurodiverse, which is both a superpower and a challenge. Are there any recommendations for how to avoid distractions or keep people engaged that struggle with structure? I think sharing the detailed agenda in advance and having really clear timings on that is important. If you're doing something for more than 25 minutes, having that kind of stretch, move, jump about, break. If it's more than an hour, definitely a break away from the screen is really, really helpful. And just clarity on how you want people to contribute. Are you going to want them to head to a whiteboard and share their ideas? Are you going to want them to share their ideas in the chat? Are you going to ask them to come in on voice so that people have a bit more of an idea of what you're expecting from them? I think can be useful there. We've got another question. The last ones, we have got time for another one or two, but I'm going to quickly guzzle a bit of water. When chairing smaller meetings, any ideas how to engage people more in contributing, so it's not just down to the person hosting, to drive questions and discussion? Really, really lovely question. I think it's useful when you're setting an agenda not to just have one-word agenda items, but to have agenda items that are a question. So you're giving people the opportunity to know what you're going to ask them in advance and to plan and prepare for that. Now, they may not always do that, but there are ways of managing the expectation to suggest that they would. I don't think most people have their best idea in a meeting. Some people will get energy from and develop their ideas through talking them through with someone else. But I think if you're able to share those questions and discussion topics in advance, that gives people an opportunity to sit down, to interact with that information, and to be able to contribute in a different way. When I used to chair the governors meeting that I mentioned, I had that problem. It was difficult to get everybody to engage. So I went to different individuals for each meeting. I said, could you please make sure you ask some questions about section 6 in the head teacher's report? Then I'd go to someone else and say, oh, there's a lot of information there in section 5. Would you mind just making sure you ask a couple of questions about it? So I was kind of teeing people up for doing that. And that created a much more lively discussion because people had done the preparation beforehand. Okay, so that's all the questions. If there are any more questions, do keep them flowing. We're just scratching the surface on this. There's so much to talk about in relation to meetings and running good meetings and creating organisations and cultures where meetings work for people. We do a full 3-hour session called Fixing Meetings. If you would like us to come in and work with your organisation around culture change and meetings, we can do that too. I've just seen a question pop up. I will come back to that in a moment. If you are interested in finding out more about what we do broadly, then please get in touch with hello@thinkproductive.co.uk. If you're specifically interested in meetings, then please feel free to reach out to Hello or to myself, and we'll be able to help you with that. On the 11th and the 12th of September, I'm going to be hosting one of our public workshops. It's called How to Be a Productivity Ninja, and we're doing it online, so it's 2 half days rather than a full day. And again, that's just about helping to manage people's energy and attention levels. That's a brilliant session. It's for anybody who's feeling overwhelmed, feeling overloaded, feeling like they've got too much work to do and not quite enough time. That's what we help you with in that session. It is highly practical. You'll be doing lots of the work. There will be a bit of listening and Q&A in the same way we've done today, but most of it, or at least half of it, will be you working with your real life workload. So there's a bit more information about that there. I'm going to give you a moment or two to grab that. We also have monthly skills taster workshops. In July, we have Cracking the Engagement Puzzle, which my colleague David delivered at the Festival of Work last week. It went down a storm. It was absolutely brilliant. So encouraging you to come along to that. There's one of those most months. We miss out August because like people are on holiday.